Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for sticking around for this final panel. I'm sure this is exactly how you imagine spending your Saturday afternoons. Um, I'm Eason from Columbia University, and today I'll be sharing a snapshot from my ongoing book project. I'd also like to express my gratitude to the Gaius Xu Foundation and the Edward Giuliano Global Fellowship for their generous support. Before diving in, a quick confession. I'm neither an engineer nor a designer, but the past 2 days have been truly an intellectual feast, thanks to all your incredible works. My presentation today turns to a unique script and the often overlooked challenges of incorporating it or encoding it from the standpoint of a scholar. In 1982, a group of Chinese anthropologists embarked on a trip to Hunan with the hope of recovering the historic sites known as Qianjiadong, the local village in which the Yao ethnic group resided. During this process, they surprisingly came across a unique script that was being written, chanted, and embroidered by women and women only in a village known as Jiangyong. This Yao script was soon given another name by these scholars, which has sustained its use to this day, and that is Nüshu, literally meaning women's script. To this day, we still don't know exactly when Nüshu originated, and this is particularly because there is a strong lack of primary sources and materials of Nüshu. This is the earliest physical evidence of Nüshu, which is a silver coin that has one side of these Nüshu characters. And it could help us date its circulation to the Taiping Rebellion, which is the 1850s and 60s. This scarcity of primary materials of Nüshu stems from mostly two key factors. First, as Nüshu was used by women in Jiangyong to document and exchange their private feelings and sentiments, many of them requested that their embroidered works and letters to be incinerated or destroyed, usually before their death. Second, because Nüshu was practiced predominantly by women, it was often associated to the local witchcraft practices among the Yao and Miao ethnic groups, which was also dominated by women. So during periods of political turmoil, such as the Sino-Japanese War and the Cultural Revolution, this association led to government suppression and the deliberate destruction of Nüshu artifacts. Because of this unique script, women in the neighboring villages of Jiangyong were able to form different types of sworn sisterhoods, with the most popular one known as Lao Tong, which later inspired Lisa See for her novel Snowflower and the Secret Fan, which was later adapted into a movie. Women in these sisterhoods would exchange their private feelings, document events in their young adulthood, and pay tribute to the local flower gods with scripts, ballads, and embroideries composed in Nüshu. I actually have with me here this piece of Nüshu letter or literature known as Sanjiao literally meaning the third day letter. I'm actually going to pass it around so you can take a closer look. So the third day letter, it is usually composed and then embroidered into this packet thing by one of the sworn sisters when her counterpart gets married, and offered to her sister on the third day after her wedding ceremony, during which day she would return to her natal family, and hence the name third day letter. A typical Sanjiao Shu would usually express strong sentiments about not going to see her sworn sister very often after her marriage, and recounting all the fond memories they shared in their previous sisterhood. Now, one noteworthy aspect of Nüshu lies in its name. This term, Nüshu, is an academic reconstruction in the scholar's attempt to save the script. a label assigned by scholars to the script and its multimodal practices. Before Nüshu was Nüshu, local female practitioners referred to the script as the end script due to its slender forms, or simply as chanting papers and chanting fans, reflecting its performative uses. Now, naming it Nüshu is significant for several reasons. First, it aligns the script with the broader Chinese tradition of shu writing, encompassing both the medium and the act of writing. However, for the women in Zhangyong, writing was not the primary form of expression, nor was reading the main mode of reception. Instead, this script thrived in its oral and performative dimensions. As this ballad would illustrate, the transmission and education of Nüshu relied heavily on vocal repetition. Nüshu is a syllabic and phonetic script, with its pronunciation deeply rooted in the diverse local dialects of Zhangyong and its neighboring villages. I emphasize dialects in its plural here, as variations between the dialects of towns often lead to differences in pronunciation and, in some cases, the specific sounds associated with individual Nüshu characters. Young women engaged with the script by embroidering it onto materials like handkerchiefs and fans during ritual celebrations. And through this participation and oral repetition, they learn to recognize letters or master idiomatic expressions often taught by maternal relatives or other experienced female practitioners. And now we have tackled the shu part in its naming. The other part is the nü, or the female. Additionally, naming or renaming the script as Nüshu inevitably frames it in this opposition to Nanshu, or the male script, which refers to the Hanzi used by men in Zhangyong. Now, the feminine marker Nü highlights this gendered specificity. Nüshu was predominantly created, used, and circulated among women. But was it truly an exclusive secret, untouched by male presence? I would argue otherwise. Nüshu was highly visible and audible within the rural Zhangyong community, designed to be vocalized and shared communally through chanting and singing and ritual practices. Women of all ages openly practiced Nüshu at various public events. Due to its delicate end script form and its expression through embroideries, men often associated it and dismissed it as an extension of nügong, or women's needlework, a skill that they deemed unworthy of their attention or effort to learn. Now, efforts to encode Nüshu began as early as the 2000s. One of the earliest scholars of Nüshu, Zhao Liming from Tsinghua University, presented an early framework for coding Nüshu characters. Using a collection of written Nüshu literature and transcribed letters, Zhao and her team analyzed character frequency, categorizing the most frequently used symbols as basic characters and less common variants as allographs. Building on this research, Zhao and her students compiled the calligraphy copybook of Nüshu standard characters, which became the foundation for encoding Nüshu into the current Unicode standard in 2017, which encompassed 397 characters. And building on their work, we now have an input method for Nüshu. Initially designed to integrate with Mandarin Chinese, and later the designers introduced an alternative input method based on the Zhangyong dialect, although it remained in a Romanized format. In 2010, a group of 7 scholars in China registered another patent for a Nüshu input method. They defined 131 stroke units of Nüshu and mapped them onto a standard Latin alphabet keyboard. In recent years, Nüshu has captured the attention of scholars and artists alike. For example, one of our fellow speakers, Lisa Huang, collaborated with Google Fonts to launch an truly extraordinary collection of Nüshu fonts to adapt Nüshu into Noto sense. I would like to really give a special shout out to Lisa for your truly remarkable and beautiful contribution. So far, this may sound like a happy story, an endangered script rescued by scholars, artists, and designers. Its female-only legacy and agency now seamlessly integrated into the digital era. However, during the past decade of my fieldwork in Jiangyong, I discovered a striking paradox. The local practitioners are far from pleased with these developments. In fact, He Yanxing, one of the few remaining and badass authentic practitioners of Nüshu, and by authentic, I mean those who lived during a time when Nüshu was actively used in daily life to exchange feelings, events, sentiments, and to participate in ritual sacrifices, has taken a radical stance. On top of Nüshu being framed and displayed in museums as yet another cultural legacy, and with women in Jiangyong occupied with producing Nüshu-themed souvenirs for cultural tourism and entrepreneurship, He Yanxing refused to create any new Nüshu artifacts or engages with any scholars. Her reasoning? She complained to me for multiple times that the Nüshu we're striving to quote-unquote save is not the Nüshu she used or learned. How so? I believe He Yanxing's discontent stems from the writing-centered approach that we as scholars and artists have often relied on in our efforts to recover scripts like Nüshu. While Nüshu includes writing, it is fundamentally a performative script. Writing is merely one mode of its expression. The current Unicode system, compiled by scholars like Zhao Liming using written letters and transcribed ballads, has largely overlooked many Nüshu characters that women chanted but never wrote down, or patterns that existed only in embroideries and not on papers. This gap becomes even wider when accounting for the diverse accents across neighboring villages. He Yanxing, back in the days when she still engaged with us nerdy scholars, often recounted what she called a battle with scholars like Zhao Liming. She would insist that certain characters should be included in the core Nüshu set, only for Zhao to counter that she had never encountered them. And at such moments, He Yanxing would often quip and say, "That's because you only read Nüshu, you don't listen to it." How do we encode a script that is rooted not in writing, but in performance? As we work to preserve Nüshu in digital formats, how can we also recover its historical context, where writing was just one of the parallel modes of expression alongside singing, embroideries, and performance? This writing-centered, logo-centric emphasis becomes problematic because much of Nüshu literature and balladry was not transmitted through writing and reading, but through listening and chanting. For example, many Nüshu practitioners from the 1920s to the 1960s or even 70s were illiterate in the sense that they could not write a single Nüshu character. Yet, they created a wealth of ballads, prose, and songs in a unique genre called 诉可怜, literally meaning lamenting miseries, which drew upon their lived experiences and personal losses. While some of these ballads were eventually transcribed or preserved through writing or embroidery, the majority remained oral performances. Over the past 2 days, I've been feeling like this. Sitting in a room full of engineers, artists, and designers. Face Interface provides this truly fascinating community and an invaluable opportunity for me to connect with colleagues across disciplines, united by our shared interests, ambitions, and creative drives to do something for these indigenous endangered languages, scripts, and cultures. And yet I found myself wondering, as a humanities scholar and as a historian, what can I contribute to this incredible conversation with my fellow speakers? I suppose my answer lies in what we do the best as humanities scholars, which is asking more questions. Behind this battle between local practitioners like He Yanxing and scholars lie deeper questions I think worth pausing to consider as we approach these vanishing scripts and languages, each unique in its own way. From naming the script Nüshu to prioritizing writing-centered methods of documentation, we must ask, as scholars, artists, and technologists, where do we draw the line between interpretation and over or misinterpretation? Where is the limit for our reconstruction of something lost? Whose voices, formats, and expressions of these scripts are overshadowed by academically conditioned approaches and the digital systems we use to encode these scripts? I'll stop here. Thank you very much.